Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at Chapter 15 from your handbook, Challenges and Opportunities. We'll be kind of diagnosing some of the planet's ailments and looking into some promising cures.
Right, and I think what's particularly exciting about this chapter is it doesn't just lay out the problems, it actually dives into some potential solutions and even, how we might govern ourselves to achieve a more sustainable future.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe we can start with section 15.1, global risks and vulnerabilities. It's a pretty stark picture, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really brings into focus those interconnected threats of climate change, biodiversity loss, and social and economic inequalities.
Yeah, and it's not just, rising temperatures or anything simple like that. The handbook actually gives some pretty startling examples. Like remember Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Haiyan, those supercharged storms that just devastated entire regions. They're becoming a lot more frequent and intense because of climate change.
Yeah.
And that's really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to climate change.
Yeah, and on the biodiversity front, one of the things that really struck me from this chapter was that 1 million species are at risk of disappearing.
Whoa.
Which is a rate that's 100 to 1,000 times higher than natural extinction rates.
1 million species.
Yeah, 1 million. So it's almost as if we're kind of dismantling the planet's natural safety net, one species at a time.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's not just about, losing all these species, because they're aesthetically pleasing or anything.
Yeah.
The handbook uses the example of the Amazon, and this really hit home for me because it's not just about, losing countless unique species to deforestation. It's about how that deforestation could impact the price of your morning coffee or that chocolate bar you enjoy.
Yeah, it's a great example of how interconnected things really are. When these ecosystems collapse, the people who rely on them most are hit the hardest, which often exacerbates those social and economic inequalities that we talked about.
Yeah, for sure. And climate change doesn't impact everyone equally either. I mean, wealthy nations contribute the most to greenhouse gas emissions, but they often have more resources to adapt. Meanwhile, developing countries and marginalized communities are left facing the harshest impacts with fewer resources to cope.
Right. It really raises the question of how do we break the cycle? How do we tackle these interconnected challenges in a way that is both effective and equitable?
Well, thankfully, the handbook doesn't just leave us hanging there. Section 15.2 dives into some innovations that might offer us a way forward.
Yeah, this is where things start to get exciting. This section really explores those technological advancements that could really move the needle on these issues.
Okay, so things like renewable energy technologies, solar and wind power are becoming increasingly cost competitive with fossil fuels.
Right.
Like imagine entire countries powered by renewables.
It's already happening in some places. Norway, for instance, is leading the charge with electric vehicles. They're making some incredible strides in transitioning to a fully renewable energy system.
Wow, that's amazing. So we've got the clean energy part, but what about food? A growing global population needs to eat, but traditional agriculture has a big impact on climate change and biodiversity loss. How does the handbook address that?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. The handbook talks about sustainable agriculture and even vertical farming as ways to address some of the root causes of the problems that we've been talking about.
Okay, can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine farms that actually capture carbon from the air and store it in the soil.
Oh,
This not only reduces greenhouse gas emissions, but it actually improves soil health and enhances biodiversity.
so it's like reversing climate change with the
Yeah.
way that we grow our food.
Exactly. And then you have things like vertical farming. Imagine fresh produce growing in these towering skyscrapers right in the heart of cities. This reduces transportation costs and emissions while providing communities with access to healthy, locally grown food.
Okay, that sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it's happening now.
It is. And what the handbook points out is that it's not just about these high-tech advancements. It's often about integrating traditional knowledge as well from indigenous communities who have been practicing sustainable land management for centuries.
Right, integrating the old with the new. So we've got the clean energy, we've got the sustainable food production. It's starting to sound like we actually might have a chance at tackling these huge challenges, but how do we actually govern ourselves to make it all happen?
Yeah, that is the $1 million question. And that's where Section 15.3 comes in, exploring this complex world of policy and governance for sustainability.
Okay, let's dive into that next.
It really highlights how it's not just about signing international agreements.
Okay.
It's about creating effective institutions, ensuring transparency, and holding people accountable. There are a lot of ingredients in this recipe.
So it's like we have all the ingredients for this delicious, sustainable meal, but now we need a skilled chef to bring it all together.
Yeah.
Governance is the chef, and the recipe is this mix of those international agreements, national policies, and those local actions.
Exactly. And the handbook actually uses some great real-world examples to illustrate this. For instance, the Paris Agreement, while not perfect, sets a framework for countries to work together to reduce emissions and adapt to climate change.
Okay, so a good starting point for global cooperation.
Right.
And then on a national level, the handbook highlights Sweden's carbon tax as a success story.
Yeah. What I find really interesting about that Sweden example is it shows that putting a price on pollution can actually work.
Right.
It incentivizes businesses and individuals to reduce their emissions by making them pay for the environmental cost of their actions.
So instead of just saying, pollution is bad, you're actually putting a concrete price tag on it.
Right.
I can see how that would change behavior.
Absolutely. And the handbook also points out that it's not just about these top-down approaches. Local governments and communities are often leading the charge when it comes to implementing sustainable solutions.
Yeah, like the handbook mentions Copenhagen's bike-friendly streets and San Francisco's goal of becoming carbon neutral. It's inspiring to see cities around the world, stepping up and demonstrating what's possible.
Those are fantastic examples, but it's important to acknowledge that governance is often the slowest piece of the puzzle. It requires building consensus, navigating complex political landscapes, and sometimes even overcoming vested interests.
So even with the best intentions, things can move slowly.
Exactly. That's why the handbook emphasizes the importance of strong institutions, transparency, and accountability. Without these elements, even the best policies can fail to deliver real change.
That's a good point. Okay, well, this has been a great overview of the challenges and opportunities laid out in Chapter 15, but I want to shift gears for a second. The handbook didn't really touch on how artificial intelligence might impact all of this. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. AI has the potential to be a powerful tool for addressing these challenges, but it also comes with its own set of risks that we need to carefully consider. It's kind of a double-edged sword.
Okay, so how so? Can you give me some examples of how AI could be used for good in this context?
Absolutely. Think about our cities. AI could optimize traffic flow, reducing congestion and emissions.
Right.
Imagine a system that uses real-time data from sensors and cameras to adjust traffic signals, prioritize public transportation, and even guide autonomous vehicles.
That sounds super futuristic, but incredibly efficient.
And then what about resource management? AI can help us use water and energy more efficiently.
Right.
We're already seeing this with smart grids that use AI to predict energy demand and optimize distribution, reducing waste and costs. AI-powered systems can also monitor water usage patterns, detect leaks, and predict droughts, helping cities to manage their water resources more effectively.
So AI could play a big role in creating these smarter, more efficient cities.
Definitely.
But what about those bigger challenges like climate change and biodiversity loss? Can AI help us there as well?
Definitely. AI is being used to develop more accurate climate models, which are essential for understanding how the climate is changing and predicting future impacts.
Right.
This information helps us make better decisions about mitigation and adaptation strategies.
Okay, and what about protecting endangered species? Can AI help with conservation efforts?
It already is. AI can analyze massive amounts of data from satellite imagery, drones, and acoustic sensors to detect patterns that humans might miss. This is helping conservationists to track endangered species, monitor deforestation, and even identify poachers in real time.
Well, it's like giving conservationists a superpower.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But, with all this talk about AI's potential for good, we can't ignore the potential downsides, right?
You're absolutely right. One of the biggest concerns is the potential for AI to worsen existing inequalities. If AI systems are trained on biased data, they can perpetuate and even amplify those biases.
So it's not just about developing AI, it's about developing it responsibly and ensuring that it benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Exactly. We need to establish clear ethical guidelines for AI development and ensure that AI systems are transparent and accountable and involve diverse voices in the conversation.
That sounds like a tall order, but it sounds crucial that we get it right.
It is. AI has the potential to either exacerbate our problems or help us solve them.
Yeah. And that actually brings us to another important piece of the puzzle that the handbook didn't explicitly address, the role of finance in driving sustainability. I mean, we've talked about carbon taxes and government policies, but how can we encourage businesses to invest in sustainable practices and technologies?
That's a great point. The private sector has a huge role to play in all of this.
Yeah.
And that's where green finance comes in. It's about redirecting financial flows towards projects and companies that are working to address climate change, protect biodiversity, and promote social equity.
So instead of investing in fossil fuels, we invest in renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, green infrastructure.
Exactly.
Seems like a no-brainer.
It does. And it's not just about divesting from harmful industries. It's about actively investing in solutions. Green bonds, for instance, are a way to raise capital for projects that have clear environmental benefits.
Right. And I've also heard about impact investing, where investors prioritize companies that are working to solve social and environmental problems alongside generating financial returns.
It's a win-win.
A win-win for sure. So imagine a world where financial markets are actually aligned with our sustainability goals, where investing in a healthy planet is not just the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do. I love that idea. And it makes me wonder, with all this talk about governments, businesses, and technology, what about the role of individuals? Can our everyday choices really make a difference in all of this?
That's a question that a lot of people ask, and it's a really important one. While individual actions might seem small, they have a collective impact. Think about the choices you make every day, what you eat, how you get around, what you buy, how much energy you use. All of these decisions add up.
Yeah, I know. I sometimes feel overwhelmed trying to be a conscious consumer in a world that often seems designed for convenience and overconsumption.
I hear you. It's about finding a balance. We don't have to be perfect, but we can all strive to make more sustainable choices within our own lives. And remember, our choices send signals to businesses and policymakers. When consumers demand sustainable products and services, it creates a market for them, driving innovation and change.
It's not about, guilt-tripping people. It's about empowering them to make a difference.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of sustainability where making environmentally and socially responsible choices becomes the norm, not the exception.
And it seems like that culture shift is already starting to happen. There's a growing awareness of these sustainability issues, especially among younger generations. People are demanding more sustainable products, supporting businesses that align with their values, and engaging in activism to push for systemic change.
It's the power of collective action. When individuals come together around a shared purpose, they can create a ripple effect that leads to real transformation. And speaking of transformation, there's one aspect we haven't touched on yet that I find particularly interesting, the role of art and culture in shaping our understanding of sustainability.
Oh, that's a fascinating angle. We tend to think of sustainability as, this scientific or political issue, but art can definitely play a powerful role in engaging people's emotions and imaginations.
Absolutely. I've seen incredible examples of artists using their creativity to raise awareness about climate change, biodiversity loss, and social injustice. Powerful murals, thought-provoking films, even music art can reach people on a deeper level than data and statistics alone.
Right. It's about tapping into the human experience.
Exactly.
Using storytelling and creative expression to communicate these complex issues in ways that resonate with people's hearts and minds.
And art can also help us to envision a different future. Imagine a world where sustainability isn't just about reducing our impact, but creating something beautiful, something regenerative, something that inspires awe and wonder.
It's about moving beyond fear and scarcity and embracing a mindset of abundance and possibility.
Art can help us reimagine our relationship with the natural world, fostering a sense of connection and responsibility.
And reminding us that we're not just passive bystanders, we're active creators with the power to shape the future we want to see.
I love that. So we've explored some pretty complex and challenging topics today, from climate change to social inequalities to intricate workings of governance. But I think it's important to end on a note of hope. What are your biggest takeaways from all of this?
I think my biggest takeaway is that despite these daunting challenges, we're not powerless. We have the knowledge, we have the technology, and we have the collective will to create a more sustainable and equitable world. It won't be easy, but it's a journey worth taking.
I couldn't agree more. And that journey starts with each of us.
So where do we even begin? It feels like such a monumental task to shift from, that mindset we've been talking about to one where humanity and the planet can thrive together.
It is a monumental task. There's no doubt about that. But I think it starts with asking ourselves some tough questions, What kind of future do we want to create? What values do we want to guide us? And what are we willing to sacrifice to get there?
Those are some pretty big questions. But you're right. We can't just sort of stumble into the future and hope for the best. We need to be intentional about the world that we want to build.
And that intentionality requires a real shift in perspective, I think. We need to move beyond this idea that we're somehow separate from nature, that we're not subject to the same laws of ecology that govern everything else on this planet.
Yeah, the handbook touches on this in section 15.3, emphasizing the need for integrated approaches to sustainability.
Right.
It's not enough to address these problems in isolation. We need to see the bigger picture and how everything's connected.
It's like trying to treat a patient's symptoms without addressing the underlying disease. You might get some temporary relief, but the problem is going to keep coming back until you get to the root cause.
So what's the root cause in this case?
Well, I think a big part of it is this disconnect between human systems and natural systems. We've built economies that are extractive and exploitative societies that prioritize consumption over conservation and lifestyles that are out of sync with the natural world.
So how do we bridge that gap? How do we create systems that are not just sustainable, but regenerative? Systems that actually enhance the health of the planet rather than depleting it.
That's the ultimate goal, and it requires a fundamental shift in our values and priorities. It's about moving beyond seeing nature as simply a resource to be exploited and recognizing its intrinsic value.
So moving from a mindset of domination to a mindset of partnership.
Exactly.
Understanding that we're not separate from nature, but a part of it.
The handbook doesn't give us a step-by-step guide for achieving this kind of transformation, but I think it's the most crucial question facing humanity. How do we create a future where both people and the planet can thrive?
Yeah, I don't have all the answers either, but I think it starts with recognizing that interconnectedness that we keep coming back to. Breaking down the silos between different disciplines, different sectors, different cultures, and approaching these challenges with a holistic mindset.
Absolutely. We need to listen to diverse voices, especially those who have been historically marginalized and disproportionately impacted by environmental degradation. Indigenous communities, for example, hold a wealth of knowledge about sustainable living that we can learn from.
And we need to embrace a long-term perspective.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in short-term thinking. But sustainability is about creating a future that's viable for generations to come.
Which often means making difficult choices today, even if they don't yield immediate benefits. It's about investing in the future, even if we won't be around to see the full results of our actions.
Yeah, it also requires a healthy dose of optimism, I think.
Right.
The challenges are huge, but humans are incredibly ingenious and resilient. We've overcome seemingly impossible obstacles before, and we can do it again.
I completely agree. It's about finding that balance between realism and hope.
Right.
Being honest about the challenges, but also believing in our capacity to create a better future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring it back to you, the listener. What does this all mean for you as you go about your day, your week, your life? How can you bring these insights into your own decisions, your own actions, your own sphere of influence?
It's about asking yourself, what can I do, even in a small way, to contribute to a more sustainable and just world? Maybe it's making changes to reduce your environmental footprint, supporting businesses that align with your values, or advocating for policies that promote sustainability.
Yeah, maybe it's having conversations with your friends and family about these issues, educating yourself about the challenges and opportunities, or simply paying attention to that interconnectedness that we've been talking about.
Remember, every action, no matter how small, can make a difference. It's the collective impact of millions of individual choices that will ultimately shape the future.
That's a powerful thought to end on. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I hope this deep dive has given you some new perspective, something to think about, and some inspiration to take action. Thanks for joining us.